Thomas Bennett hunched his shoulders against the cold drizzle, one hand clutching his 7-year-old daughter Lily's small fingers, while the other gripped a worn umbrella that had seen better days. They hurried down the crowded street, dodging puddles that threatened to soak through the holes in his only pair of work shoes. "Daddy, I'm hungry," Lily said, her voice small but insistent. Thomas glanced down at his daughter, his heart twisting at the simple request. Payday was still 3 days away, and the $20 in his wallet needed to stretch until then. "We'll be home soon, sweetheart. I'll make your favorite mac and cheese, okay?" Her face brightened immediately. "With the little hot dogs cut up in it," he forced a smile. "We'll see." The truth was, there were no hot dogs in their nearly empty refrigerator, but he couldn't bear to disappoint her again. At 32, Thomas had never imagined this would be his life working 2 jobs, barely making rent on a tiny 1-bedroom apartment, and raising his daughter alone after his wife, Claire, had died in a car accident 3 years ago. He'd been an electrician with a promising career, but the company he worked for had gone under during the economic downturn. Now, he worked days at a hardware store and nights as a janitor at an office building, cobbling together barely enough to keep them afloat. As they turned down Maple Street, Thomas noticed a commotion up ahead. A group of men had surrounded someone against the wall of the building, their postures aggressive and threatening. Without thinking, he steered Lily to the opposite side of the street, wanting to keep her away from whatever was happening. "Stay close, Lily," he murmured. But as they passed, Thomas heard a woman's voice, firm but with an undercurrent of fear. "I've asked you 3 times to let me pass." "Move aside now." Thomas hesitated. He should keep walking, it wasn't his business, and he had Lily to think about. But something in that voice made him pause and look across the street. 4 men had cornered a woman against the brick wall of the bakery. She was dressed simply in jeans and a gray sweater, her auburn hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. Nothing about her screamed wealth or status, but she held herself with unmistakable dignity despite the threatening circle around her. "Come on, pretty lady, we're just being friendly," one of the men said, his voice carrying across the street. Thomas made a split-second decision. "Wait here for just a minute, sweetheart," he said to Lily, guiding her to stand under the awning of a closed shop. "Don't move, okay?" "Daddy needs to help someone." Lily nodded solemnly, her eyes wide as she watched her father cross the street, umbrella still in hand. "Excuse me," Thomas said loudly as he approached the group. "Is there a problem here?" The men turned, sizing him up. Thomas wasn't particularly large, just under 6 feet, and lean from too many missed meals, but the set of his jaw and the steadiness of his gaze made them hesitate. "Mind your own business, man," the tallest of the group said. Thomas fixed his eyes on the woman. "Madam, are you okay?" "Do you need help?" Her hazel eyes met his, relief flickering across her face. "Yes, I'd appreciate some assistance. These gentlemen seem unable to understand that I'd like to continue on my way." "She's playing hard to get," one of the men snickered, but Thomas could see the uncertainty in his expression now that there was a witness. Thomas stepped closer, positioning himself between the woman and her harassers. "My daughter and I would be happy to walk with you to your destination," he said calmly. And these men were just leaving. For a tense moment, he thought they might escalate the situation. His heart pounded as he calculated how to protect both the woman and Lily if things turned physical. But after a few seconds of awkward silence, the group's leader shrugged. "Whatever, man. She's not worth the trouble anyway." They slouched away, throwing a few insults over their shoulders that Thomas ignored. He turned to the woman, who was brushing down her sweater with slightly trembling hands. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That was very kind of you to intervene." "No problem. Are you okay? Did they hurt you?" She shook her head. "No, just scared me a little. I'm Amelia, by the way, Amelia Lockhart." "Thomas Bennett," he replied, extending his hand. Her grip was firm, her skin soft against his calloused palm. "And that's my daughter, Lily, waiting patiently across the street." Amelia looked over at the little girl huddled under the awning and smiled. "She looks like a sweetheart." She is, Thomas said proudly. Let me walk you wherever you're headed, just to be safe. I'd appreciate that, Amelia said. I was just going to catch the bus on Elm Street. Thomas nodded and waved Lily over. She darted across the street, carefully looking both ways as he'd taught her. Lily, this is Miss Lockhart. We're going to walk her to the bus stop. Lily looked up at Amelia with curious eyes. Those men were being mean to you. Amelia crouched down to Lily's level. They were, but your dad was very brave and helped me out. He helps everyone, Lily said matter-of-factly. Even when we don't have much to share. Thomas felt his cheeks warm with embarrassment, but Amelia just smiled. That makes him a very special person, doesn't it? As they walked toward the bus stop, the rain started to ease up. Lily chattered away about her second-grade class and the science project they were working on, while Thomas tried not to notice how the evening sunlight, breaking through the clouds, caught the auburn highlights in Amelia's hair. When they reached the bus stop, Thomas expected a quick goodbye. Instead, Amelia hesitated. Would you two like to get something to eat? As a thank you for helping me, there's a nice diner around the corner. Thomas automatically started to decline. Pride had been one of the few things he'd managed to hold onto over the years, but Lily's hopeful expression and the rumble of his own empty stomach made him reconsider. That's really not necessary, he began. Please, Amelia said. It would mean a lot to me. There was something genuine in her expression that wore down his resistance. All right, but just this once. The diner was warm and smelled of coffee and fresh baked pie. They settled into a booth, Lily next to Thomas and Amelia across from them. Thomas couldn't help noticing how Amelia seemed completely at ease in the modest surroundings. Unlike some of the wealthier customers he occasionally served at the hardware store, who seemed to think even breathing the same air as the staff was beneath them. As they studied their menus, Thomas discreetly checked the prices, calculating what he could reasonably allow her to pay for without feeling like he was taking advantage. Get whatever you'd like, Amelia said, noticing his hesitation. I'm starving, so I plan to enjoy a full meal. When the waitress came, Lily ordered a cheeseburger and chocolate milkshake with the confidence of someone ordering a 5-course meal at a fancy restaurant. Thomas chose the cheapest item on the menu, a grilled cheese sandwich, despite the more appealing options that made his mouth water. Amelia ordered a club sandwich and fries. So what do you do, Thomas? Amelia asked after the waitress left with their orders. I work at Bennett's hardware during the day, he said, omitting his night job out of habit, and I'm raising this little monster. He tickled Lily's side, making her giggle. Daddy's super good at fixing things, Lily chimed in. He can fix anything, even Mrs. Rodriguez's washing machine that everyone else said was broken forever. Amelia smiled. That's impressive. Are you a repairman by training? I was an electrician, Thomas admitted. But the company I worked for went under a few years ago. I've been picking up whatever work I can find since then. Mommy died, Lily said suddenly, her small voice matter-of-fact in the way that only children can be about devastating events. So it's just me and Daddy now. Thomas felt the familiar tightness in his chest at the mention of Claire. That's right, Pumpkin, but we're doing okay, aren't we? Lily nodded seriously. We're a team. Amelia's eyes softened. I'm so sorry for your loss. Thank you, Thomas said, uncomfortable with the sympathy but appreciating her sincerity. It's been 3 years now. We take it day by day. He quickly changed the subject. What about you? What do you do? A flicker of something hesitation perhaps crossed Amelia's face. I work in finance, she said after a brief pause. Investment consulting, mostly. That sounds complicated, Thomas said, imagining her in a cubicle somewhere, possibly struggling with the same financial worries that plagued most people he knew. It can be, she agreed, but I enjoy it. Their food arrived, momentarily pausing the conversation. Lily attacked her burger with enthusiasm, getting ketchup on her chin almost immediately. Thomas handed her a napkin automatically, his eyes never leaving her face to make sure she actually used it rather than just crumpling it up. As they ate, the conversation flowed surprisingly easily. Thomas found himself telling Amelia about Lily's school and how proud he was of her reading skills, which were well above grade level. Amelia, in turn, spoke about growing up in a small town upstate before moving to the city for college. She was easy to talk to, with none of the awkwardness Thomas usually felt around new people. When the check came, Amelia insisted on paying despite Thomas's protests. As they stood to leave, she hesitated again. "I know this might seem forward," she said, "but I'd really like to see you again." "Both of you," she added quickly, glancing at Lily. Thomas was caught off guard. It had been so long since anyone had expressed interest in spending time with him, not since Claire died, really, that he wasn't sure how to respond. I work a lot," he said lamely. "Daddy, can we see Miss Amelia again, please?" Lily looked up at him with pleading eyes. "She's nice and she likes chocolate milkshakes too." Amelia laughed, the sound light and genuine. "High praise indeed." She pulled a business card from her purse and handed it to Thomas. "My cell number's on there, think about it." Thomas took the card, noticing the simple, elegant design with just her name and contact information. No company logo or title. "I will," he promised. Outside the diner, they said their goodbyes. Amelia surprised them both by bending down to give Lily a quick hug, then straightening to offer Thomas her hand again. "Thank you again for earlier," she said. "Not many people would have stopped to help." "Anyone would have done the same," Thomas demurred. "No, they wouldn't," Amelia said firmly. "Trust me, I know." As they parted ways, Amelia heading toward the bus stop, and Thomas and Lily turning toward their apartment building 6 blocks away, Thomas slipped the business card into his pocket, already certain he would call her, even as he told himself it was a bad idea. Women like Amelia, educated, put together, with careers in finance, didn't usually give second glances to men like him, struggling to make ends meet with dirt perpetually under their fingernails. But as Lily skipped ahead, talking excitedly about their new friend, Thomas allowed himself a small, cautious hope that maybe, just maybe, this time might be different. Later that night, after Lily was tucked into bed in their small apartment's only bedroom, Thomas slept on the pull-out couch. He took out Amelia's card again. In the quiet of the living room, with only the distant sound of traffic filtering through the thin windows, he studied the embossed letters of her name, Amelia Lockhart. The name seemed vaguely familiar, but he couldn't place it. Probably just a common name, he thought. He should be getting ready for his night shift at the office building, but instead, he found himself reaching for his phone. Before he could second-guess himself, he typed out a simple text message. "This is Thomas from earlier. Just wanted to make sure you got home safely." He hit send before he could talk himself out of it, then hurried to change into his janitor's uniform, telling himself not to expect a reply anytime soon. To his surprise, his phone buzzed as he was tying his shoes. "I did, thank you. I was hoping you'd text. How's Lily?" Thomas felt a ridiculous grin spread across his face. He quickly typed back, "Already asleep. She liked meeting you." The response came almost immediately. "The feeling is mutual. She's a wonderful child. You should be proud." "I am," he wrote back. "Listen, I have to go to work now, but maybe we could continue this conversation tomorrow." "I'd like that." "Sleep well when you get the chance, Thomas." He slipped the phone into his pocket, the warm feeling in his chest unfamiliar but welcome. It had been so long since he'd felt this kind of connection with someone that he'd almost forgotten what it was like. As he locked the apartment door behind him, leaving Mrs. Rodriguez from across the hall to listen for Lily, as she did every night he worked, Thomas tried to temper his expectations. One pleasant dinner and a few text messages didn't mean anything in the grand scheme of things. He couldn't afford to get distracted by daydreams when his reality required such constant attention. But as he rode the bus to the downtown office building where he spent his nights mopping floors and emptying trash cans, Thomas couldn't help but think about Amelia's smile and the way she'd treated Lily with such natural warmth. For the first time in 3 years, he found himself looking forward to something other than just making it through another day. The next morning, after dropping Lily off at school, Thomas headed to Bennett's Hardware for his shift. The store had no relation to him, despite sharing his last name, a coincidence that had actually helped him get the job when the owner, Frank Bennett, had joked that he must be family. "Morning, Tom," Frank called from behind the register as Thomas entered through the staff door. "Got a delivery of those new drill sets coming in this afternoon." "I'll make space in aisle 3, Thomas replied, hanging up his jacket. He checked his phone quickly, hoping for another message from Amelia, but there was nothing. Shaking off the disappointment, he tucked the phone away and got to work. The morning passed in a blur of customer questions, inventory checks, and restocking shelves. Around noon, as Thomas was helping an elderly man select the right light bulbs for his garage, the bell over the door chimed. He glanced up automatically, his heart skipping a beat when he saw Amelia walk in. She was dressed more professionally today in tailored slacks and a cream-colored blouse, her auburn hair falling in loose waves around her shoulders. She spotted him immediately and smiled, giving a small wave as she browsed the first aisle. Thomas finished with his customer as quickly as possible without being rude, then made his way over to her. "This is a surprise," he said, suddenly aware of his worn work shirt with the Bennett's Hardware logo and his name stitched above the pocket. "I hope it's a good one," Amelia replied. "I was in the neighborhood for a meeting and thought I'd stop by." "It's definitely good," Thomas assured her, then hesitated. "But I'm working until 5. "I know," she said with a smile. "I actually do need to pick up a few things. My kitchen faucet has been dripping, and I've been putting off dealing with it." "I could help you with that," Thomas offered before he could stop himself. "I mean, if you want, it's usually a simple fix." Amelia's eyes lit up. "Really? That would be amazing. I've been quoted ridiculous amounts to have someone come look at it." "Plumbers can be expensive," Thomas agreed. "But most faucet issues just need a new washer or a ring. I can show you what you need." He led her to the plumbing section, asking questions about her faucet to determine what parts she might need. As they talked, Thomas found himself relaxing. This was his element, solving practical problems, knowing exactly which tool or part would fix an issue. "So these should do it?" Amelia asked, holding the package of washers Thomas had recommended. "Most likely. If not, it might be the cartridge, but let's start with the simple fix." He hesitated again. "I get off at 5, and I need to pick up Lily by 5:30, but after that, I could come take a look at it for you." Amelia's smile widened. "I'd really appreciate that." "I can write down my address. Actually," Thomas interrupted, the practicalities of his life reasserting themselves, "I'd need to bring Lily with me. My regular sitter isn't available tonight." "That's not a problem at all," Amelia said without hesitation. "I'd love to see her again." "And I could order us dinner as a thank you." Thomas wanted to say no, that he didn't need payment for a simple favor, but the prospect of a proper meal that he didn't have to cook after a long day was too tempting. "That sounds great." They arranged for Thomas to come by around 6, and Amelia paid for the washers, waving off his offer to use his employee discount. "See you tonight," she said, and the warmth in her voice stayed with him long after she'd left the store. By 5:30, Thomas had picked up Lily from her after-school program, explained their evening plans, and listened to her excited chatter about seeing Amelia again all the way to the address they'd been given. The apartment building was in a much nicer part of town than Thomas had expected, a sleek high-rise with a doorman and a marble-floored lobby. He hesitated on the sidewalk, suddenly feeling out of place in his work clothes, with his toolbox in one hand and Lily's small backpack in the other. "Is this where Miss Amelia lives?" Lily asked, her eyes wide as she took in the glass and steel structure. "I think so," Thomas said, double-checking the address Amelia had written down. "Let's find out." The doorman eyed them with barely concealed suspicion as they approached the desk. "Can I help you?" "We're here to see Amelia Lockhart," Thomas said, straightening his shoulders. "She's expecting us." The doorman's demeanor changed instantly. "Of course, sir. Miss Lockhart's penthouse. I'll let her know you're on your way up." "Penthouse." Thomas repeated, but the doorman was already on the phone. "Miss Lockhart, your guests are here." "Yes, I'll send them right up." He hung up and gestured toward the elevator bank. "Take the express elevator on the right. It goes directly to the penthouse level." Thomas felt Lily's hand slip into his as they walked across the lobby, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. Inside the elevator, she bounced on her toes as they ascended, watching the floor numbers climb with fascination. "Daddy, we're going so high," she exclaimed. "Almost to the sky." Thomas squeezed her hand, his mind racing. Penthouse, express elevator. What kind of investment consulting did Amelia do exactly? The elevator doors opened directly into a foyer with gleaming hardwood floors and soft recessed lighting. Amelia was waiting for them, a warm smile on her face, dressed more casually now in jeans and a soft-looking sweater. "You found it," she said, stepping forward to greet them. "Welcome to my home." Lily darted forward, her initial shyness forgotten. "You live in the sky," Amelia laughed. "It sometimes feels that way, doesn't it? Would you like to see the view?" As Amelia led Lily toward the floor-to-ceiling windows on the far side of the massive living room, Thomas stood frozen in the foyer, taking in his surroundings. The apartment was beautifully decorated in neutral tones, with occasional splashes of color, the furniture elegant but inviting. An original painting hung on one wall. Thomas didn't know much about art, but he recognized quality when he saw it. This wasn't the apartment of someone who worked in finance. This was the apartment of someone who owned the finance company. "Thomas," Amelia's voice brought him back to the present. "Are you coming?" He joined them at the windows, where Lily had her face and hands pressed against the glass, looking out over the city skyline. "This is amazing," he said, because it was, and because he couldn't think of what else to say. Amelia gave him a slightly nervous smile. "I should have been more upfront about this." She gestured around the apartment. "I'm sorry." "No, don't apologize," Thomas said quickly. "It's just not what I was expecting." Before Amelia could respond, Lily tugged on her sleeve. "Can I see the rest of your castle?" The tension broken, Amelia smiled down at her. "It's not quite a castle, but yes, I'd be happy to give you a tour. The kitchen faucet is in the guest bathroom, Thomas, if you'd like to take a look while we explore." Thomas nodded, grateful for the task to focus on while he processed this new information. He followed them through the apartment, listening as Amelia showed Lily the dining room, library, and home office, each room more impressive than the last. The guest bathroom turned out to be larger than his entire kitchen at home, with dual sinks and a marble vanity. The dripping faucet was a high-end model he'd seen in home improvement magazines, but never actually worked on before. Still, plumbing was plumbing, and he set his toolbox down with determination. By the time he'd fixed the leak, it was indeed just a worn washer and cleaned up his minimal mess. Lily and Amelia had returned to the kitchen, where they were sitting at the island counter, looking at a delivery menu. "All fixed," Thomas announced, washing his hands in the now properly functioning sink. "Good as new." "Thank you so much," Amelia said. "What do I owe you?" "Nothing," Thomas said firmly. "It was an easy fix and you already bought the parts." Amelia looked like she wanted to argue, but instead gestured to the menu. "Well, at least help us decide what to have for dinner. Lily and I are torn between pizza and Chinese food." "Pizza," Lily declared. "Chinese," Thomas said at the same time, making Lily giggle. Amelia's eyes sparkled with amusement. "How about we get both? I'm not much of a cook, so I always have a stash of takeout menus." "Both seems excessive," Thomas protested. "Not at all," Amelia insisted. "We'll have leftovers. It's practical, really." Thomas knew she was humoring him, making the extravagance sound reasonable, but he appreciated the effort. All right, both it is. While they waited for the food, Lily explored the living room, immediately drawn to a bookshelf filled with children's titles. Thomas and Amelia sat on the nearby couch, an awkward silence settling between them. So, Thomas finally said, "Investment consulting, huh?" Amelia had the grace to look sheepish. "I did start as a consultant, but now I run my own investment firm." She paused. "I should have been more forthcoming. I've just found that people tend to act differently when they know." "That you're loaded," Thomas finished for her, the words coming out more bluntly than he'd intended. To his relief, Amelia laughed. "That's one way to put it. Yes." Thomas looked around the penthouse, trying to imagine what his life would be like if he never had to worry about bills again. It was impossible to conceptualize. "Why were you walking alone downtown yesterday?" he asked suddenly. "Don't you have a car and driver or something?" "I do, actually," Amelia admitted. "But I like to walk sometimes. It helps me think, and it keeps me connected to the real world. Peter, my driver, was supposed to pick me up at 6, but I decided to walk a bit farther than usual, and those men started following me before I could call him." Thomas nodded, understanding the desire for normalcy, even if his version of normal was very different from hers. "I'm glad I was there," he said. Amelia's expression softened. "So am I." The food arrived shortly after, an abundance of pizza boxes and Chinese takeout containers that made Lily's eyes widen with delight. They ate at the dining table, the formality of the setting at odds with the casual meal, but Amelia didn't seem to mind when Lily accidentally dripped soy sauce on the tablecloth. "I'm sorry," Thomas said automatically, reaching for a napkin. "It's just a tablecloth," Amelia said with a shrug. "Things are meant to be used, not preserved in pristine condition." As they ate, the conversation flowed more easily again. Amelia asked Lily about school, listening with genuine interest to her detailed explanation of the solar system model she was building. Thomas found himself relaxing, the initial shock of Amelia's wealth fading as her personality, the same one that had drawn him in at the diner, reasserted itself. After dinner, when Lily began to yawn despite her protests that she wasn't tired, Thomas knew it was time to go. He helped clean up the remains of their meal, despite Amelia's insistence that she'd take care of it later. "Thank you for dinner," he said as they stood in the foyer, Lily half asleep against his side, "and for your hospitality." "Thank you for fixing my faucet," Amelia replied. "And for the company, both of you." There was a moment of silence, the air between them charged with something Thomas couldn't quite name. Then Lily yawned widely, breaking the spell. "I should get her home to bed," Thomas said reluctantly. "Of course," Amelia agreed. "But I'd really like to see you again. Both of you," she added, echoing her words from the previous night. "Maybe this weekend, if you're free," Thomas hesitated. The sensible part of him knew that pursuing any kind of relationship with someone from such a different world was asking for heartache. But looking at Amelia's hopeful expression, he couldn't bring himself to say no. "I'm off on Sunday," he said. Amelia's face lit up. "Sunday is perfect. I know a great park not far from here with a playground Lily might enjoy." "Can we, Daddy?" Lily asked, suddenly more awake. "Please." Thomas ruffled her hair affectionately. "Yes, sweetheart, we can." As they rode the elevator down to the lobby, Lily leaning sleepily against his leg, Thomas tried to make sense of the evening. He'd gone from believing Amelia was a modestly paid office worker to discovering she was apparently wealthy enough to own a penthouse apartment with an original painting on the wall. It was disorienting, to say the least. And yet, when she smiled or laughed, when she talked about growing up with 3 brothers or her favorite books as a child, none of that mattered. She was just Amelia, the woman who'd texted to make sure Lily had a good day at school, who ordered too much food so he could take home leftovers without it seeming like charity, who looked at him like what he had to say actually mattered. As the doorman hailed a taxi for them, ignoring Thomas's protest that they could take the bus, he found himself looking forward to Sunday with an anticipation he hadn't felt in years. When Sunday arrived, Thomas woke early, despite having worked late the night before. Lily was already up, sitting on the end of his pull-out bed with barely contained excitement. "Is it time to go to the park with Miss Amelia yet?" she asked the moment she saw his eyes open. Thomas groaned, but couldn't help smiling at her enthusiasm. "Not for a few hours, pumpkin. She's not expecting us until 11. They spent the morning getting ready with more care than their usual weekend routine. Thomas trimmed his beard, put on his least worn jeans, and even ironed his shirt a blue button-down that Claire had always said brought out his eyes. Lily insisted on wearing her favorite dress, a purple number with pockets that was slightly too small but still her go-to for special occasions. "You look very pretty," Thomas told her as he braided her hair the way she liked. "Do you think Miss Amelia will like my dress?" Lily asked, fidgeting as he secured the end of her braid with an elastic. "I'm sure she will," Thomas assured her. "Now, remember what we talked about. Miss Amelia is being very nice to invite us to the park, so we need to be on our best behavior." "I know, Daddy," Lily said with the exaggerated patience of a child who's been told the same thing multiple times. "I'm always good." Thomas raised an eyebrow and she giggled. "Almost always," she amended. They arrived at the park at exactly 11, having taken a bus and then walked the last few blocks. The park was bigger and more elaborate than their neighborhood playground, with multiple climbing structures, swings, and even a small carousel. Amelia was waiting for them near the entrance, dressed casually in jeans and a light jacket, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked younger somehow, more relaxed, and Thomas felt the now familiar flip in his stomach at the sight of her. "You made it," she said, her smile wide and genuine as she waved them over. "Miss Amelia," Lily broke free of Thomas's hand and ran toward her. "I like your park," Amelia laughed, bending down to greet her properly. "I'm glad you approve. I thought we could play for a while and then have a picnic lunch. I brought sandwiches and snacks." She gestured to a large picnic basket and blanket sitting on a nearby bench. "You didn't have to go to all that trouble," Thomas said as he reached them. "It was no trouble," Amelia assured him. "I like picnics, and the weather is perfect for it." The weather was indeed ideal, sunny with a light breeze, the first truly warm day of spring. They spent the next hour following Lily from one playground feature to another, Thomas pushing her on the swings while Amelia encouraged her to go higher, then both adults watching nervously as she navigated the monkey bars with determined concentration. "She's fearless," Amelia commented as Lily reached the end of the monkey bars and dropped to the ground with a triumphant yell. "Too fearless sometimes," Thomas agreed. "She gets that from her mother." It was the first time he'd voluntarily mentioned Claire to Amelia, and she turned to him with gentle curiosity. "What was she like, if you don't mind me asking?" Thomas watched Lily run toward the slide, his heart full of both love and the familiar ache of loss. Claire was vibrant. Always laughing, always planning some new adventure. She was an elementary school art teacher, amazing with kids. She could take a rainy day and turn it into a magical experience with just some paper and paint. "She sounds wonderful," Amelia said softly. "She was," Thomas agreed. "She would have loved you, actually. She always said I was too serious, needed more people in my life who could make me laugh." Amelia smiled. "I'll take that as a high compliment." They walked in comfortable silence for a few moments, watching Lily make friends with another little girl at the slide. "What about you?" Thomas asked eventually. "Have you ever been married?" Amelia shook her head. "No. I've had a few serious relationships, but nothing that felt right enough to make that commitment. I've always put my career first, which doesn't leave much room for a personal life." "And now," Thomas ventured. Amelia's eyes met his, a hint of vulnerability in their hazel depths. "Now I'm starting to think I may have missed out on some important things while I was building my empire." Before Thomas could respond, Lily came running back, breathless and flushed with excitement. "Daddy, can I ride the carousel? Please. The other girl's daddy is taking her." Thomas hesitated, automatically checking his wallet in his pocket and calculating the cost against their budget. "My treat," Amelia said, noticing his hesitation. "In fact, why don't we all ride? I haven't been on a carousel in years." To his surprise, Thomas found himself agreeing. The three of them boarded the small carousel together, Lily choosing a brightly painted unicorn while Thomas and Amelia took horses on either side of her. As the ride began to move, classical music playing from hidden speakers, Thomas watched his daughter's face light up with pure joy. He glanced over at Amelia, who was watching Lily with a similar expression of delight, and felt something shift inside him. There was something so natural about this moment, the three of them enjoying a simple pleasure together, that it almost made him forget the vast differences in their circumstances. After the carousel, they spread the picnic blanket under a large oak tree. Amelia unpacked the basket, revealing gourmet sandwiches, fresh fruit, homemade cookies, and juice boxes for Lily. "Did you make all this?" Thomas asked, impressed. Amelia laughed. "Hardly. I can barely boil water without setting off the smoke alarm. I had it catered." She paused, looking uncertain for the first time that day. "Is that weird? Should I have at least pretended to make it myself?" "No," Thomas said honestly. "I appreciate your honesty, and the food looks amazing." They ate with appetites sharpened by the morning's activities, Lily describing in detail every playground feature she'd conquered, while Thomas and Amelia exchanged amused glances over her head. After lunch, Lily's energy finally began to wane. She lay on the blanket between them, her head pillowed on Thomas's lap as Amelia read aloud from a children's book she'd brought along. Within minutes, Lily was asleep, her small chest rising and falling rhythmically. "She's out," Thomas said softly. All that running around finally caught up with her. Amelia smiled, setting the book aside. "She's an amazing child, Thomas. You've done such a wonderful job with her." "Thank you," he said, the simple compliment meaning more to him than she could know. "It hasn't been easy, but she makes it all worthwhile." They sat in companionable silence for a while, the warm spring air and the gentle rustling of leaves creating a peaceful bubble around them. Thomas realized with a start that he couldn't remember the last time he'd felt this relaxed, this content in the moment. "Can I ask you something?" Amelia said eventually, her voice quiet so as not to wake Lily. "Of course." "Why did you help me that day, with those men?" She looked at him curiously. "You had Lily with you. Most people would have just kept walking, especially with a child to protect." Thomas considered the question seriously. "I'd like to say it was pure altruism, but honestly, I think I would have walked by if you hadn't spoken up for yourself." "There was something in your voice, a determination not to be intimidated that made me stop and look. And once I saw the situation, I couldn't just leave you there." Amelia nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Most people do just keep walking. It's why I was so surprised when you crossed the street." She paused. "I've spent most of my adult life being either invisible or hyper-visible in all the wrong ways. People see my money, my position, my gender, but rarely just me." "I didn't know you had money when I stopped," Thomas pointed out. "Exactly," Amelia said with a soft smile. "You just saw someone who needed help. Do you know how rare that is?" Thomas felt his cheeks warm under her gaze. "I'm just glad I was there." "So am I," Amelia said. "More than you know." The rest of the afternoon passed in gentle conversation as Lily continued to nap. Thomas found himself telling Amelia things he rarely shared about his struggles to find steady work. His fear of failing Lily. His dream of someday returning to his career as an electrician and maybe even starting his own business. In turn, Amelia spoke of the challenges of building her company in a male-dominated industry, the loneliness of success, and her strained relationship with her parents, who had never understood her ambition. "They wanted me to marry well and be a society wife," she explained. "When I insisted on going to business school instead, my father nearly disowned me. We barely speak now, even though I've proven myself 100 times over." "That's their loss," Thomas said firmly. "You're extraordinary." The words slipped out before he could censor them, but Amelia's pleased smile made him glad he'd spoken honestly. When Lily finally woke, groggy and disoriented, the sun was starting to lower in the sky. Thomas checked his watch, surprised to find it was already past 4. "We should probably head home soon," he said reluctantly. "Lily has school tomorrow, and I need to prepare for my night shift." Amelia nodded, though her expression showed similar disappointment. "Of course. Let me help you pack up." As they gathered the remains of their picnic, Lily tugging sleepily at Thomas's hand, Amelia seemed to be considering something. "I have an idea," she said finally. "It's a bit presumptuous, but my company is looking for a full-time electrician for our new office building. The position comes with benefits and a salary that's above market rate." She hesitated. "Would you be interested?" Thomas stared at her, caught completely off guard. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm suggesting you apply for one," Amelia clarified quickly. "I wouldn't make the final hiring decision. That would be up to our facilities manager, but I could certainly put in a good word." Thomas felt conflicting emotions surge through him. On one hand, the opportunity was exactly what he'd been hoping for, a chance to return to his profession with the stability and benefits Lily deserved. On the other hand, he couldn't shake the feeling that it was charity, a rich woman taking pity on him. "I don't know," he said slowly. "I wouldn't want any special treatment." "It's not special treatment to recommend a qualified candidate," Amelia insisted. "You have the skills and experience. The only reason you're not already in a position like this is because of bad luck and a tough economy." She touched his arm gently. "Just think about it, okay? I can email you the job description." After a moment, Thomas nodded. "I'll think about it." As they said goodbye at the park entrance, Amelia surprising them both with warm hugs, Thomas found himself reluctant to end the day. Despite his misgivings about the job offer, he couldn't deny the connection he felt with Amelia, a connection that went far beyond gratitude or attraction. "Thank you for today," he said, holding Lily's hand as she leaned tiredly against his leg. "It was perfect." Amelia's smile lit up her entire face. "It was, wasn't it? Let's not wait too long to do it again." As Thomas and Lily made their way home on the bus, his daughter fell asleep against his shoulder, worn out from the excitement of the day. Thomas stared out the window, his mind replaying every conversation, every smile, every moment when Amelia had looked at him with those expressive hazel eyes. He was falling for her, he realized with a mixture of excitement and dread. Falling for a woman who lived in a penthouse, who casually mentioned catering picnics, who could probably buy his entire apartment building without blinking. It was insanity. They came from completely different worlds. What could he possibly offer someone like her? And yet, as he remembered the way she'd listened to him talk about his dreams, the way she'd read to Lily with such patience, the vulnerability in her voice when she spoke about her parents, Thomas couldn't help but hope that maybe, just maybe, those differences didn't matter as much as what they shared. By the time he'd gotten Lily home, fed, bathed, and tucked into bed, Thomas had nearly convinced himself that applying for the electrician position wouldn't be accepting charity. It would be accepting a professional opportunity based on his qualifications, just as Amelia had said. He was about to text her for the job details when his phone buzzed with an incoming message from her. "I had a wonderful time today. Attached is the job description I mentioned. No pressure, but I think you'd be perfect for it. And for what it's worth, my facilities manager is notoriously picky and doesn't care at all what I think about his hires. It would be on merit alone." Thomas smiled at how well she'd anticipated his concerns. He rayed through the attached description, his hope growing with each bullet point. The position was indeed perfect, utilizing all his skills, offering a salary that would change their lives completely, and even including possibilities for advancement. Before he could overthink it, he typed out a response. "Thank you for sending this. It looks like exactly what I've been hoping for. I'll update my resume tonight and apply tomorrow." Her reply came almost instantly. "I'm so glad. And for complete transparency, I should tell you the position reports to the facilities manager, not to me. So even if you get it, I wouldn't be your boss, just in case that was a concern. Thomas hadn't even thought of that potential complication, but he appreciated her foresight. That's good to know, and for what it's worth, today was one of the best days I've had in a very long time. Thank you for that. There was a longer pause before her next message arrived. For me too. Sleep well, Thomas. As he settled onto his pull-out couch that night, Thomas found himself grinning at the ceiling like a teenager. For the first time in years, the future held more promise than anxiety. And whether that was because of a potential job or a potential relationship, or both, he wasn't sure. But he was eager to find out. Over the next week, Thomas found himself in a whirlwind of activity. He applied for the electrician position, was called for an interview 2 days later, and by Friday had received a job offer that left him stunned. The salary was nearly double what he currently made with his 2 jobs combined, with benefits that would mean Lily could finally see a dentist for her loose tooth, and he could stop putting off his own checkups. Throughout it all, Amelia remained a steady presence through texts and calls, careful never to mention the job process except to say she was keeping her fingers crossed for him. Instead, they talked about their days, shared funny stories, and made plans for the weekend. When Thomas called to tell her the news that he'd been offered the position, her genuine excitement confirmed what he'd already come to believe, that her recommendation had indeed been professional rather than personal. The facilities manager called me after he met you, she admitted. He said you were exactly what they were looking for and thanked me for sending such a qualified candidate his way. He had no idea we were friends. The slight hesitation before friends made Thomas wonder if she, like him, was hoping for something more. I start in 2 weeks, he told her. I've already given notice at both my current jobs. It feels surreal. You deserve this, Thomas, Amelia said firmly. All of it. That Saturday, they celebrated with a dinner at Amelia's penthouse. Thomas insisted on cooking despite her protests that she wanted to treat him, and he spent the afternoon making his specialty lasagna while Lily and Amelia baked cookies for dessert. Watching them together in the kitchen, flour dusting Amelia's cheek and Lily giggling as they shaped the cookie dough, Thomas felt a sense of rightness that both thrilled and terrified him. They looked like a family, like they belonged together, in a way he hadn't thought possible again after Claire died. Later, after Lily had fallen asleep on Amelia's luxurious guest bed, a room Amelia admitted she'd specifically prepared for the little girl, complete with night light and stuffed animals. Thomas and Amelia sat on her balcony, sharing a bottle of wine and looking out at the city lights. I've been thinking, Amelia said after a comfortable silence, about us. Thomas felt his heart rate quicken. Oh, she turned to face him, her expression serious but warm. I really like you, Thomas, and I adore Lily. These past 2 weeks have been wonderful. I feel the same way, he admitted, setting down his wine glass. But nothing, Amelia said with a small smile. That's it, I like you, I want to keep seeing you, and I wanted you to know that. Thomas blinked, surprised by her straightforwardness. Just like that. Just like that, she confirmed. Life's too short for games, don't you think? Thomas had to laugh. You're not like anyone I've ever met. I hope that's a good thing, Amelia said, her smile widening. The best thing, Thomas assured her. And before he could second-guess himself, he leaned forward and kissed her. Her lips were soft and warm, and she responded immediately, her hand coming up to rest against his cheek. The kiss was gentle, a question and answer all at once, and when they pulled apart, they were both smiling. I've been wanting to do that since the diner, Thomas admitted. I've been wanting you to do that since the diner, Amelia countered, making him laugh again. As they continued to talk, the night growing cooler around them, Thomas felt the last of his reservations about their differences begin to fade. Yes, Amelia was wealthy beyond his comprehension. Yes, they came from different worlds. But sitting here with her, sharing hopes and dreams and quiet laughter, none of that seemed to matter. What mattered was the way she listened when he spoke, the kindness she showed Lily, the determination with which she pursued her goals. What mattered was the person she was, not the penthouse she owned. When Thomas and Lily finally left the next morning, Amelia walked them to the elevator, her goodbye kiss to Thomas lingering just long enough to make him wish they were alone. "Can we come back soon?" Lily asked as the elevator doors began to close. "I like it here with Miss Amelia." "So do I, sweetheart," Thomas replied, watching Amelia's smiling face until the doors shut completely. "So do I." The next few weeks passed in a blur of transitions. Thomas started his new job, quickly impressing his supervisor with his skills and work ethic. With his first paycheck, he was able to pay off a small debt that had been hanging over his head for months, and with the second, he started a savings account for Lily's future education. Meanwhile, his relationship with Amelia deepened. They saw each other several times a week, sometimes with Lily and sometimes alone when Mrs. Rodriguez was available to babysit. They went to movies, tried new restaurants, always at Amelia's insistence, though she was careful not to always choose expensive places, and spent quiet evenings at his apartment or her penthouse, just talking and being together. 1 month into their relationship, as they sat on her balcony watching a summer thunderstorm roll in across the city, Amelia broached a subject Thomas had been avoiding. "I was thinking," she said, her fingers intertwined with his on the armrest between their chairs. "Your lease is up next month, right?" Thomas nodded. His landlord had already informed him that rent would be increasing by 15%, a hike he could now afford with his new job but still found steep for the small apartment. "What if you and Lily moved in here?" Amelia suggested, her voice casual though Thomas could detect an undercurrent of nervousness. "There's plenty of room, and Lily already loves it here." Thomas stared at her, caught off guard by the offer. "Amelia, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to answer right away," she said quickly. "I know it's a big step, but I've been thinking about it a lot, and it just makes sense. You wouldn't have to pay rent, Lily would have her own room instead of sharing with you, and we'd get to be together more." Thomas felt a complex mix of emotions: gratitude, love, but also a stubborn pride he couldn't quite shake. "I appreciate the offer, but I don't think I'm comfortable with that arrangement. I'm not looking for a free place to live." "It wouldn't be free," Amelia countered. "We'd split the utilities and groceries, and you'd contribute in other ways. You've already fixed about a dozen things around here that I would have had to hire someone to deal with." When Thomas still hesitated, she added, "This isn't about money, Thomas. It's about wanting to share my life with you and Lily." The sincerity in her voice nearly convinced him, but he shook his head. "I'm sorry, but I need to provide a home for my daughter. It's important to me. I hope you can understand that." Amelia was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "I do understand, but will you at least consider a compromise? There's a great apartment building about 10 blocks from here, nice, but not extravagant. I know the owner, and there's a 2-bedroom opening up next month. The rent would be reasonable, within your budget with your new job. You'd have your own place, but we'd be close enough to see each other easily." Thomas considered the offer. It sounded like a fair compromise, a step forward without sacrificing his independence. "I'd like to see it," he said finally. "If it's as good as you say and truly within my budget, then yes, I'd consider it." Amelia's smile was worth any lingering doubts he might have had. "Thank you for considering it. That's all I ask." The apartment turned out to be everything Amelia had promised: spacious, well-maintained, in a good neighborhood, and with rent that, while still a stretch, was manageable with his new salary. When Lily saw the second bedroom that would be hers alone, her excitement sealed the deal. They moved in 2 weeks later, with Amelia helping to coordinate the logistics, and even buying them a housewarming gift of a new couch to replace Thomas's worn pull-out. "This doesn't mean I'm paying for your furniture from now on," she clarified when he initially protested. "It's a one-time gift because you need a couch and I want to celebrate this new chapter." Please accept it in the spirit it's offered. Thomas relented, recognizing that her generosity came from love, not pity. And when they sat on the new couch that evening after Lily was asleep, christening it with kisses that grew increasingly passionate, he had to admit it was a significant upgrade from his old one. As summer turned to fall, their lives settled into a comfortable rhythm. Thomas excelled at his job, earning a small raise after just 4 months. Lily started 3rd grade, thriving with the stability their new life provided. And Amelia, despite her demanding career, made time to be a constant presence in both their lives. They spent Thanksgiving at Amelia's penthouse, with Thomas cooking the turkey and Amelia attempting with limited success to make her grandmother's cranberry sauce. When Lily fell asleep that night in her room at Amelia's, now fully decorated to her specifications, with a canopy bed she adored, Thomas found himself thinking again about Amelia's offer for them to move in permanently. "I've been thinking," he said as they sat by the fireplace, the remains of their feast still evident on the dining room table, "about what you said a few months ago." Amelia looked up from her book. "Which part?" "About living together," Thomas clarified. "I think I'm ready to revisit that conversation. Not right away, but maybe after the holidays, once Lily finishes this semester at school." Amelia's eyes lit up, but she kept her voice measured. "What changed your mind?" Thomas considered the question. "Nothing changed exactly. I just realized that my pride was getting in the way of what might be best for all of us. I love our apartment, but Lily loves it here, and I love you. Being apart when we could be together just seems unnecessary." It was the first time he'd said the words aloud, "I love you," though he'd been feeling them for weeks. Amelia set her book aside and moved to sit beside him on the couch. "I love you too," she said softly. "And I love Lily. I'd be honored to share my home with both of you." As they sealed the decision with a kiss, Thomas marveled at how far they'd come from that rainy evening when he'd impulsively crossed the street to help a stranger. They moved in officially on New Year's Day, a symbolic fresh start that felt right to all of them. Lily was ecstatic, running from room to room in the penthouse, declaring each space, ours now, with a proprietary air that made both adults laugh. For Thomas, the adjustment was more complex. He insisted on contributing financially, even though Amelia owned the penthouse outright, setting up automatic transfers to her account for his share of the utilities and groceries. He also carved out space for his tools and projects in one corner of her home office, making the penthouse feel more like a shared space than her domain that they were visiting. One evening in late January, as a snowstorm raged outside and they sat around the dining room table playing Monopoly, Lily, to everyone's amusement, was ruthlessly bankrupting them both. Thomas found himself watching Amelia as she laughingly protested Lily's hotel fees. The sight of them together, his daughter, and the woman he loved, filled him with a contentment he hadn't thought possible after losing Claire. Later that night, after Lily was asleep, he broached a subject that had been on his mind for weeks. "There's something I want to talk to you about," he said as they prepared for bed. "It's about us." Amelia looked up from where she was applying moisturizer at her vanity. "That sounds serious." Thomas sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly nervous. "It is, but in a good way." "At least, I hope you'll think so." Amelia came to sit beside him, taking his hand. "Tell me." "I love you," Thomas began. "More than I thought I could love anyone again after Claire, and I love the life we're building together, the three of us. But there's still something that doesn't feel quite right." Amelia's hand tightened on his, her expression concerned. "What's that?" Thomas took a deep breath. "I don't want to be your boyfriend forever, or your partner, or whatever label we put on it." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "I want to be your husband." Amelia's eyes widened as he opened the box to reveal a ring not large or ostentatious, but beautiful in its simplicity, with a single diamond set in a band of white gold. "I saved for this," Thomas said quickly. "From my own earnings. It's not as grand as what you're probably used to. It's perfect." Amelia interrupted, tears welling in her eyes. Absolutely perfect. I haven't asked the question yet, Thomas said with a nervous laugh. Amelia smiled through her tears. Then ask it. Amelia Lockhart, will you marry me? Yes, she said without hesitation. Yes, I will marry you, Thomas Bennett. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Thomas felt the last piece of his heart that had been broken by loss finally heal. Not erasing Claire or what they had shared, but making room for this new love, this second chance at happiness. Lily's going to be so excited, Amelia said as they held each other close. She's been dropping hints for weeks about wanting to be a flower girl. Thomas laughed, not at all surprised that his perceptive daughter had sensed what was coming. She's going to be impossible once we tell her. I can't wait, Amelia said, her smile radiant in the soft bedroom light. For all of it telling Lily, planning the wedding, being your wife, being a family officially. All of it. As they celebrated their engagement in the most intimate way possible, Thomas marveled at how a simple act of kindness on a rainy evening had led to this moment of perfect happiness. He had walked a woman past harassing men, clueless that she was a millionaire who would come to love him and whom he would love in return, not for her wealth, but for the person she was beneath it all. Their wedding, held in early summer in the botanical gardens where they'd had their third date, was intimate but elegant. Lily, as predicted, took her flower girl duties with utmost seriousness, scattering rose petals with precise concentration before running to stand beside Thomas at the altar. When Amelia appeared at the end of the aisle, radiant in a simple white dress that highlighted her natural beauty, Thomas felt his breath catch. As she walked toward him, her eyes never leaving his, he silently thanked whatever twist of fate had put him on that street corner at exactly the right moment. Their vows were personal and heartfelt, with Thomas promising to be not only a loving husband but to continue fixing everything she broke. Which, let's be honest, is a lot, he teased, making her laugh through her tears. Amelia, in turn, vowed to love both him and Lily unconditionally, to support their dreams, and to never take for granted the gift they had given her by letting her into their lives. When Lily was invited forward for a special moment in the ceremony, Amelia knelt down to her level, presenting her with a delicate gold bracelet. Lily, she said, her voice clear enough for all to hear, I promise to love you as my own, to support your dreams, to listen when you need to talk, and to always be there for you, no matter what. Thank you for sharing your daddy with me, and for letting me be a part of your family. There wasn't a dry eye in the garden as Lily threw her arms around Amelia's neck, whispering something that made Amelia hold her even tighter. At the reception, as they danced their first dance as husband and wife, Thomas couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought them to this moment. What are you thinking about? Amelia asked, noticing his thoughtful expression. About that rainy day, he replied. And how differently things might have turned out if I'd just kept walking. Amelia's arms tightened around his neck. But you didn't. You stopped. You helped. That's who you are, Thomas Bennett, and that's why I fell in love with you. As the night went on, filled with dancing and laughter and joy, Thomas watched his new wife dancing with his daughter, both of them giggling as they twirled in circles. The sight filled him with a happiness so complete it was almost overwhelming. Later that night, as they prepared to leave for their honeymoon, a compromise 1 week at a luxury resort Amelia had chosen, followed by 1 week at a rustic cabin Thomas had selected, Lily hugged them both tightly. I love you, Daddy, she said to Thomas, then turned to Amelia. And I love you. Mom. It was the first time she had called Amelia Mom, and the significance of the moment wasn't lost on any of them. Amelia knelt down, her eyes shining with tears. I love you too, Lily, she said, her voice thick with emotion. So much. As they drove away from the reception, waving to Lily, who would be staying with Mrs. Rodriguez for the week, Thomas reached for Amelia's hand. You know, he said thoughtfully, when people ask how we met, they never believe the story. Amelia laughed, the sound still his favorite in the world. It does sound a bit like a fairy tale, doesn't it? The struggling single dad who helps a damsel in distress, not knowing she's secretly wealthy. And they lived happily ever after, Thomas finished, bringing her hand to his lips. They did, Amelia agreed, her eyes meeting his with all the love he could ever hope for. They absolutely did. And as they drove toward their future together, Thomas knew with absolute certainty that some fairy tales did come true not because of magic or wealth, but because of kindness, courage, and the willingness to open one's heart to love again. 2 years later, Thomas stood in the doorway of their home office, watching as Amelia gently rocked their 3-month-old son, James, while simultaneously reviewing quarterly reports on her laptop. Lily, now 10, sat cross-legged on the floor nearby, reading a book and occasionally looking up to make funny faces at her baby brother. "How are my 3 favorite people doing?" Thomas asked, entering the room. "Daddy." Lily jumped up to hug him. "Mom's teaching me about stocks and investments, but James keeps interrupting by being cute." Amelia looked up with a tired smile. "He does have impeccable timing for cuteness, especially when I'm trying to work." Thomas took the baby from her arms, cradling his son against his chest. James had Amelia's hazel eyes and Thomas's dark hair, a perfect blend of them both. "Why don't you finish up what you're doing, and I'll take over baby duty," he suggested. "Lily and I can start dinner." "You're a lifesaver," Amelia said gratefully. "I just need another half hour to finish these projections." As Thomas and Lily headed to the kitchen, his daughter skipping ahead, he reflected on how much their lives had changed in the 3 years since that fateful rainy evening. He still worked as an electrician, but now he headed the entire facilities department at Amelia's company, overseeing a team of maintenance professionals. His suggestion to implement green energy solutions throughout their office buildings had saved the company thousands and earned him a substantial bonus last quarter. Amelia continued to run her investment firm, though she'd scaled back her hours after James was born, delegating more responsibilities to her capable executive team. They developed a rhythm that worked for their family, both pursuing their careers while making time for each other and their children. "What should we make for dinner, Lily Bug?" Thomas asked as they entered the kitchen. "Spaghetti and meatballs," Lily declared without hesitation. "It's Mom's favorite, and she looks tired." Thomas smiled at his daughter's thoughtfulness. "Excellent choice. Want to be my sous chef?" As they worked together, Lily chattering about her day at school while Thomas listened attentively, he felt a wave of contentment wash over him. Their life wasn't perfect, no life ever was, but it was filled with love, respect, and the kind of partnership he'd never thought he'd find again. Later that evening, after dinner was eaten and cleared away, after Lily had finished her homework with Amelia's help, after James had been fed and rocked to sleep in the nursery they'd decorated together, Thomas and Amelia finally had a moment alone on the balcony where they'd shared so many important conversations. "I've been thinking," Amelia said, leaning against his shoulder as they looked out at the city lights. "Uh-oh," Thomas teased. "Should I be worried?" She playfully swatted his arm. "No, you should not. I was thinking about starting a foundation. Something to help single parents who are struggling to make ends meet, providing job training, childcare assistance, housing support." Thomas wasn't surprised. Amelia's philanthropic streak had always been present, but since Lily and now James had come into her life, she'd become particularly passionate about causes related to children and families. "That sounds amazing," he said sincerely. "You'd be great at that." Amelia turned to face him, her expression earnest. "I want you to help me design it. You know better than anyone what would actually make a difference to families in those situations." Thomas felt a surge of pride at her trust in his perspective. "I'd be honored." "I have some ideas already, actually." "Of course you do," Amelia said with a fond smile. "You always do." As they discussed the potential foundation, brainstorming ideas and sharing visions, Thomas was struck by how seamlessly they worked together, each contributing their unique strengths. Respecting the other's viewpoint, building something stronger than either could create alone. It was the same way they'd built their life together, not by erasing their differences, but by embracing them, finding strength in their complementary perspectives and experiences. When they finally went to bed that night, checking on both children one last time, Thomas pulled Amelia close as they settled under the covers. "Thank you," he murmured against her hair. "For what?" she asked sleepily. "For everything," he said simply. "For being harassed by those men that day, for accepting my help, for buying Lily that chocolate milkshake, for loving us both enough to make room in your life." Amelia propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him with love in her eyes. "Thank you for stopping when you could have kept walking, for showing me what real strength looks like, for letting me love you and Lily, and for giving me James." As they drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, Thomas reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them here. From a chance encounter on a rainy evening to this moment of profound contentment, their story had unfolded in ways neither could have predicted. He had been a struggling single father, doing his best to provide for his daughter. She had been a successful businesswoman who had everything except someone to share it with. Both had been missing something vital, not even realizing what they needed until they found each other. And now, as their family slept peacefully in the home they'd made together, Thomas knew with absolute certainty that some of life's greatest blessings came disguised as ordinary moments like the simple decision to help a stranger on a rainy day. Clueless that she would become the great love of his life.